Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the planning board meeting for October 5th, 2021. My name is Carrie Barnick. I'm the planning board chair. Before we get started, I would like to read a few different announcements. This open meeting of the planning board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of June 16th, 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. All members of the planning board are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order allows the planning board to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. Members of the public who wish to view the live stream of this meeting may do so by going to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube via the link listed on the agenda. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comment. Now, members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Amy Pretsky?
Here.
Anthony Zaitin?
Here.
Michelle Gillespie?
Here.
And Millie Milton?
Here.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Kathy Joubert?
Here.
Okay, for ground rules. We don't have any hearings tonight. I'll just quickly cover. Chair will invite each speaker on the agenda by name to make a presentation. Participants will provide their full name and hold till they're called. Each speaker will mute their phone or not speaking. Those responding will be asked to wait until the floor is yielded to them. Speakers who wish to respond to comments of others do so through the chair. Each vote taken by the board will be conducted by a roll call vote. And that looks like that covers everything for tonight. So why don't we get started with the agenda? As I mentioned this evening, we do not have any public hearings. So we will get down to business with old and new business, starting with consideration of the minutes. Did everyone have a chance to read the minutes from September 7th?
I did.
Okay,
Yep.
Any amendments for the minutes from the 7th?
I did not have any.
Okay. No other. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the September 7th minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes for September 7th, 2021.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Anthony?
Aye.
Amy?
Aye.
Michelle?
Aye.
Millie?
Aye.
And Carrie's an aye. Next, we have the minutes from September 21st. Are there any amendments to the minutes from September 21st?
Nope.
Okay, sorry. There was one suggestion from me down in the, I'm just going to bring my screen up here. Can everybody see the minutes here?
Yeah.
This was the motion just to go into executive session, and we had quite a bit declared in here. I wondered if it would just be easier to copy and paste the exact bullets from the agenda and put them in here. I mean, I guess it's just kind of all slumped together. I wasn't sure if that would be easier and more clear that the reasons we went into executive session, or if it even matters. Does anyone think it matters or worth copying and pasting as it was written in the agenda? I read it from the agenda. Any thoughts? Does it matter?
I think you should just keep it the way it is. It just talks about the litigation.
Yeah. Okay, it wasn't a big concern. I just wanted to make sure it was actually, it seemed to be correct. It looks
As long
okay.
as it matches. Like, I didn't actually read the two of them because I just thought it matched. So I didn't compare, but if you think it matches.
Yeah, let me take a quick look. I do want to make sure it matches.
Are you questioning whether it matches what was said?
I just want to make sure that so it was very specific. They were the exact reasons written from the agenda. There were those 3 paragraphs in the agenda, and I kind of read through them. So that might have been difficult if Melanie was trying to follow, or maybe she went back and looked at the agenda. So I just wanted to, oh, go ahead, Kathy.
No, I was just going to say, I think you don't have to do that detail. I don't think, Carrie, because I think Melanie just cut and pasted it from the agenda and just put it in.
Oh, she did. Okay.
but, I can just double check that tomorrow.
Okay, great. Then we don't have to go and check.
No.
All right, there are just a lot of numbers read, and I just want to make sure, like, the case numbers are the same and all of that. I didn't go back and look, so we just make sure. Okay, so pending that, I have nothing else unless anybody else does. Okay, is there a motion to accept the minutes from September 21st?
I make a motion to accept the minutes from September 21st, 2021.
Okay,
Second.
All right, all in favor, Anthony,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Michelle,
I,
Millie,
Aye.
and Carrie's an aye. Okay, great. Next we have the rules and regs. We are talking about modifying the days required for an app between when everything's submitted for an application and the hearing. Kathy, I don't know if you heard anything from your group of experts on things what other boards are doing, or any insight into that.
Sure. Yes, I did. I've heard from several of the planners in various communities, and I went back and called a few of them just to verify how their process worked. And for the most part, everyone that I did hear, the towns that I did hear from, they either have it's either just a verbal understanding, the staff and the board just repeats it every time an applicant comes in and says, where the board's preference is to have, material, pick the time, whether it's a week ahead, 2 weeks ahead. I don't think anyone had more than a week ahead of time. One of the communities had it written onto their application, which is easy enough to do if you want to do something like that. We have, actually, it's not so much the physical application, but we have a cover sheet that is written for the planning board and for the zoning board of appeals, and that goes to every applicant when they are, contemplating filing for whatever it is for the town. So we could add something to that. I asked all the towns that I had contacted whether there was anything punitive that the board did to the applicant, whether they, if the material didn't come in time, did the board just automatically say, okay, well, we're not going to hear you at the next meeting. And nobody did that. One of the towns tried to do that, but it kind of not backfired on them, but it just didn't work. And it came across as negative as opposed to, okay, let's, try to work through this cooperatively. So I would think that if it's something that, this board wants to add, that they want material, X amount of days ahead of time, that we can put that into our, once you determine what that is, we can put that onto our instructional sheets that we give out to people. And then I think depending on what the material is, and if you didn't receive it, I think you could then make a determination as to whether or not, right there at the meeting, as to whether or not you would need to continue the hearing. If it was something obviously very significant that you were looking for from the applicant, or, a set of revised site plans, or, an updated traffic report or something, and you didn't have that information, then, that's reason enough to just say you don't have anything new to discuss tonight. So you're not going to, have the hearing and any interaction until you receive that material. And then other times, people had said that some of the planners had said, if it was something that, not that it was insignificant, but if it was something that the board still did need, but they could go on with the hearing, then they would go on with the hearing and then, continue it to the next meeting. Again, waiting for that information. So some of them found it effective, to have it written on there. Most found it effective to have it written on their, the application materials. And I think one of the towns, I can't remember which one it was, but one of the towns I think did put something into their actual rules and regulations saying that, the material had to be in by such and such a, again, whatever it was, 7 days, 5 days before the meeting.
Okay, great. Any thoughts from the board on that?
I think that makes sense to have it written on the application materials, just to give everybody sort of that same time frame to work within.
I agree.
I agree. And I don't think that should be punitive either. So
No.
just writing it on there as a reminder, I don't think there should be any penalties.
Anthony, any thoughts?
Yeah, I said I agree with that, with what Millie said.
Does it belong in the rules and regs or just the application?
I mean, it doesn't even hurt to put in the rules and regulations. How hard is it? Because we just vote to put it in, right? But definitely the application is the most important because they probably don't read our rules and regulations.
Right.
Yeah, I was just gonna make that point. We hope and we encourage them to read the rules and regulations and, but obviously they certainly read the application materials more readily than the rules and regulations. And as staff, whether it's myself or other staff members, we'll point out to applicants that they need to read the rules and regulations, especially when it comes to site plans. But I think it would be much more effective and eye-catching that it would be in the application materials. And, if you just want to, tonight, pick whether it's 5 days, 7 days, 3 days, whatever it is, that we want people to abide by, including staff. I think you had talked about staff on that. But it would just be, general saying that materials need to be provided by, so many days in advance of the hearing.
Okay, so for someone like Fred, who typically needs time to also respond to those materials, is there like that time frame we should work with as a starting point, or do you just want us to throw out dates? I mean,
Well, whatever it is that you're looking for. So if it's, certainly, a lot of times people, your meetings are on Tuesday nights. So a lot of times, and it's sort of just the pattern that everyone has gotten into, applicants are bringing in, additional material on, a Thursday or a Friday. So, which means that staff really, especially if it's coming in on a Friday, staff's not looking at it until Monday. So, so if you want to incorporate or add in some time there for staff to be looking, to have a chance to review it and respond, and again, it's not going to be a perfect system, but I would think you'd want to be looking at maybe like 7 days in advance of the meeting.
okay, any thoughts on that for timing?
Sounds good to me.
I agree.
I would agree. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Michelle, do you feel that way as well?
No, I think that's good. I was suggesting 3 business days, which takes you up to Wednesday, which is just 6 days, prior, but 7 is the same, so.
And Anthony, you as well?
Yeah, I am for 7.
Okay. And for me, I don't want it to be punitive, like using it as a way to not have someone have a chance to be heard, but I would like it to be there in the event that it's something significant where we need to be able to say, all right, we really need this information to make a decision here, so we'll have to hold. I don't think it's meant to. I just remember we had a time period where all these things are coming in, and sometimes it's the same day and we have multiple hearings and staff is going crazy and we're going crazy, and it's just so hard to come with a straight head.
No, I agree. So we'll start with 7 days. We'll work over the next couple of weeks of just adjusting, just amending the packet. Maybe, underline it, put it in red, but, so that people notice that it's something new. And then we'll go from there. And if it doesn't work, or we find out that we need more time or less time, then we can adjust.
Okay, that sounds good. Any other thoughts on that? All right. Master Plan Implementation Committee, any updates for that one?
We did meet again. So we met last Thursday. And Kathy couldn't get in, unfortunately. I think there were network problems all last week at the town. So, but we still met for like an hour and a half, and I thought it was a great discussion. Did you, Millie?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, so we talked about recommendations, and we're going to get an updated recommendation list from Kathy. And we also talked about a mission statement.
Mhm.
But I think it was a great group of people. I thought we had a great discussion, but I
I'm
think
excited.
we meet again October 21st.
Yeah.
And we'll have a new recommendation.
Nice.
There was one thing though I watched last night, and it might be too big for us, but I'll think about it, is last night Open Space actually went through all their recommendations. And because one of our homework assignments was to go through our recommendations and see what we've already done, what might be short-term that the planning board actually could get done, and to give the master plan implementation an update at our next meeting. And I watched Open Space last night, and I noticed that they did go through the checklist.
Mhm.
So I was thinking maybe next meeting, we might want to think about doing that. I could just open up the implementation page and go through all the recommendations that have planning board in them. See if there are any that we can check off.
I just thought that's a great idea.
Okay.
So how that happened was that when the Open Space Committee met last night, everyone received ahead of time, the Open Space Committee members, the master plan implementation highlighted in what was the objective for the open space and trails. And then they went through it just to review that they were on task for their plans. If you remember the way the master plan is written, there's an ongoing, and then there's sometimes there's an immediate, but then there's a medium, which is a 5 to 7 year out, and then there's long-term, which I explained to for those not familiar with the master plan, so that nobody goes out to the public and thinks this is happening tomorrow, that it's all like scheduled out in years. It could be a 5 to 7 year plan because of the cost that's involved. It could be a long-term plan. So that's what the master plan worked on over the course of, I think it was a year and a half. And so certainly I think the board members should go back and look at what the planning board was given as appointments for. And for Millie, you'd probably go back as the Historical Society, want to work with Norm on that.
Yep.
Right. And then you make sure that you're sort of on your checklist. And I guess you could always go back and say, we see something that's, down on the 5 to 7, maybe needs to go up, accelerate it up a little bit higher. I mean, that could be, a discussion you could have with the implementation committee. So that's how we did it.
So I can make sure, prior to the next meeting that, there's the link to the master plan, obviously on the planning's planning department's webpage. But I can pull out the chapter, the implementation chapter for all of you. And just in-house, we can go through and highlight what is associated with the planning board, and then, get that to you prior to your next meeting.
Oh, great. Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Let's see. Before we get into bylaws, do we want to go over that A&R, Kathy?
Sure. Let me. Okay, can everybody see that? Okay, so this is an A&R that came in for property on Lincoln Street. I believe it's 31 and 35 Lincoln Street. So this is, there's an existing house and a garage. It's an oversized lot. So it's just the engineer dropped it off. They're proposing to, subdivide the property into 2 lots. And this has an existing, there's a note here because it crosses the line that will be taken down. So in this house, the existing house They created the lot line so that it meets all the setbacks. And then, I would anticipate that this will be for sale at some point. So that's all it is. It's just a very straightforward, taking an oversized lot and creating 2 lots out of it.
Okay, any questions? Is it, so I actually can't see what's written in the building, even with glasses.
Oh, let me
Is
see.
it-
Well,
That's okay.
typically what, if there's an existing structure on the
Oh, okay,
property,
I see.
they will just make a note to say that it's coming down. So therefore there's no zoning violation. And if someone were to submit a plan and say this barn or shed, I don't know what it is, garage, existed and they didn't have a note on that, we would send it back and say, you need to put a note on it saying that that is going to be removed.
Okay, but so my question is that note all that's required? It doesn't have to be written into any other documentation? It's just,
Right, just on the plan.
Okay.
That's all that's necessary.
okay. Any other questions on this?
No. Thanks for expanding, because I was trying to zoom in too, just to read it.
Oh, I can zoom in more too if you need me to.
Oh, I can see it now. I can see
Does
I
it.
can see
Okay.
it now too. Yeah.
Well, with my eyesight, I have to be on top of it, but so I can always make it bigger. But so Carrie or anybody who's ever available, if you want to stop by, at some point this week, we'll have it out on the counter.
Okay.
For you to sign.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the A&R for, what's the address here? 30 Lincoln Street?
I think he's got 35.
Okay, so motion to approve the A&R for 35 Lincoln Street,
I'll move.
second?
Second,
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Millie,
aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
Michelle,
I,
and Carrie's an aye. Okay, that's it for A&Rs, Kathy?
Yes, there was only one.
Okay, any subcommittee updates to cover?
Nothing yet.
Okay. All right, so then why don't we get back to our bylaws discussion? Since we last met, I know at our last meeting, we didn't have much time to dedicate to it. So we talked about just distributing materials. Before this meeting, Amy, you distributed several different items. I don't know if everyone had a chance to look at it, but do you want to start with those particular pieces that you sent to everybody and go through that a little bit? Or I don't want to put you on the spot.
Sure. We can bring up brewery. I don't know if, let me check to see if I have it. I don't know if anyone has it.
Yep, I have a whole bunch brought up.
Yeah. Let me just see. Since that was one that we talked about last year, might as well start there.
Okay. All right, do you want me to share my screen or you bring?
Sure. You can if you want.
Okay.
Close some screens.
All right, here we go. Is everyone looking at craft brewery now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what I did was I sent out the craft brewery, and underneath this, there's a couple of definitions from different towns, whether it be Grafton, Shrewsbury, but this first one from Shrewsbury right below seemed like a definition that seemed pretty basic, but also held it to a capacity of not more than 15,000 barrels. I'm not sure what people think, if we want to start small or if you just want to do a brewery that doesn't have any capacity limit, or if people don't want to do breweries at all. But I know there were questions about the amount of water it would take and the traffic. So if we kept it to a small brewery, because we're not a huge town, I didn't know if that would sit well with people. I don't know if people had a chance to read all the material I sent out, but I just picked a couple different towns, and a lot of them use similar definitions.
Okay.
So that one too says microbrewery. It has the same thing with 15,000 barrels.
I'm guessing that, and I haven't done any research on this, you know, until I get some more direction as far as, you know, what you want to pursue for town meeting. But, you know, same as last year and this year, I'm assuming that 15,000 is somewhere either in, you know, some state regulation about this type of use, because just about every town uses that 15,000. So I don't know what, in fact, it kicks it, that, you know, if it stays under 15,000 or if it goes over, does something else happen if it goes over? You know, are different things needed from the state? I don't know at this point.
Okay.
Can you go back up to it, Carrie?
Yeah, sure.
It's the one Shrewsbury just started, and it also adds in that it includes a tap room and also a restaurant where you could serve some food and outdoor dining. So it seemed like it covered it all. So if it's somewhere we want to start, maybe Kathy, you can look into it and see if you think, or if staff thinks that's something that would fit in Northborough.
What are the notes? You included notes below as it relates to Northborough. Did you want to speak to that at all?
Those are from last year. That's what Bob said we would have to do today if we wanted a craft brewery by use variance on like Groundwater 3, that we would need to get, I haven't read it recently, but special permit, site plan review, use variance. Those are just the steps you'd have to do if someone wanted to come to Northborough today and do it.
Okay.
So I think it's just easier to add a definition in our definitions and then add it in the use table where we think it would fit best. Shrewsbury up above was actually putting that in their downtown, their village district, but we could just have it say there's bigger lots on Business West or industrial. I don't know. We can talk about it as a board. Where would you picture it?
Okay, so let me ask the board, are we at a point where we want to take these bylaws and decide, do they go to the next level? Or maybe we decide, you know, not interested in the next level or needs more research? Or do we want to continue to dive into each one? I just want to figure out from the board, at what point do we want to narrow? Any thoughts on that?
I wonder if we do it bylaw by bylaw, or it's up to you. I feel like the brewery one we talked about a lot last year. So I think it's, if Kathy has to do some research, we should move it forward if people are interested. I think people were interested last year, but there are other bylaws that we haven't really talked about as much that maybe
We need more information.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that a fair statement for the board? Do we want to start to whatever extent we can start to pass them through as going to the next phase? Are we ready to make some of those statements or not?
I think so. I'd be interested, I don't know if anybody knows what exactly a 15,000, is it 15,000 barrel? What that, I mean, could we, are there any examples of what that would look like? There's plenty of breweries around here. If there could be some examples.
That's a good idea. So I hear like a noise when you speak, Anthony. Do you guys hear that as well?
Yes.
Do you hear that, Anthony?
Maybe to answer that question, either like one of us, or like I could call, or Kathy could call, like Cold Harbor is really small and it's in Westboro. You could ask how many barrels they brew a year.
Mhm.
Or like Medusa's in downtown Hudson, like how many barrels do they produce a year? Just to get an idea of what 15,000 barrels is, because those seem like they fit in their downtowns or in a small area. Whereas if you go into Boston and look at Harpoon, like that's huge.
Okay. All right.
Wait,
So
is this
okay.
any better, by the way?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, so some examples would be like Medusa or Cold Harbor, and just to find out what an equivalent would be to that.
Do you want to do that, Kathy, or do you want me to call them, or?
No, no, I mean, I can easily do that, but just, further define this as we're talking tonight, we're looking at, you're looking at, or what I'm sensing, you're looking at a small scale because you want this in possibly the downtown area. And last year, you also talked about, including this in the industrial district for, on a much larger scale, where it would primarily be more, of a facility that's manufacturing this, and not so much that they've got a pub associated with them. So those are the two things you still want to go forward with, or and again, this, as you were saying, Carrie, this can develop over the next couple of months. But I can certainly call around to the communities that I know that not only have the bylaw, but have the actual, brewery in their town, and get the ins and outs of that.
Right, because maybe even like a brewery the size of Medusa might even buy a parcel in the industrial because they want a bigger space to have like outdoor tables and outdoor dining, and you just never know. But I guess it would be good to get an idea of how many barrels a year. And what's that one in Framingham? How many barrels they have? Because they're probably a little bigger.
John Harvard, or I think there's several in Framingham.
Jack Abbey's, is that what you're thinking of?
Jack Abbey's, yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're more of in a warehouse.
Mm.
So maybe if someone could compare, or Kathy, like Jack Abbey's versus a Medusa or a Cold Harbor.
I think this requires in-person research.
Me too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but Kathy, are you hoping that we narrow down the types we're looking at, like a brew pub versus a?
No, I think I have enough just to start to do some, again, Amy's, put together some of these bylaws. I just want to talk to the communities, about the, ins and outs of their bylaw. Is it working successfully? Traffic is always a concern. So, are they just using, restaurant, their guidelines or their regulations for restaurant parking, that type of thing. But yeah, I don't think it's a heavy, it's not a heavy lift.
And there was something with the Board of Selectmen also needs some sort of license in this equation. Wasn't there something else for the Board of Selectmen?
Well, yeah, there would always be the selectmen involved because they're the ones who issue the liquor license. So we want to at least want to investigate whether, if we're adding a new use or new way to serve alcohol, does the town receive, additional licenses from the state, or is it all just part of, what we have available? Because I don't think there's anything available right now, but I can double check that with the Board of Selectmen, because there's pouring licenses, and then I'm dating myself, but package stores, actual just liquor stores, versus the pouring, which is at a restaurant. So I just don't know how that fits in, but but certainly, the selectmen would be involved, because they're the ones who do the licensing with the Alcoholic Beverage Commission.
Okay, here's what it was we talked about before, the Farmer Series pouring license. There was some sort of like weird different license that was associated with these for some reason. Maybe I'm not remembering properly, but I thought it was something where it doesn't come out of our regular count of liquor licenses. There's some sort of like different licenses. So I don't remember for sure, but I could have sworn that was some sort of discussion topic.
Yeah, well, I'll verify that, Carrie.
Okay.
Just so that we know what the whole picture is here.
Okay, okay, does it sound like the board is interested, before Kathy moves and does all that research, is it something the board is interested in this bylaw this year, at least pushing forward to the next phase anyway? Any
Mhm.
thought?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. All right, it sounds like a majority is in favor. So we will push this one forward. Okay. Did you want to speak to another one, Amy, or do you want to?
So just for a little comparison, I'm seeing that Medusa produces right now 1,500 barrels a year, but they're looking to expand their space in Holliston. And they say they're at capacity in their space in Hudson at 1,500 barrels a year.
1,500 or 15,000?
1,500.
Oh. Okay. And so this bylaw, these bylaws had 15,000
Up
barrels.
to, yeah.
Where are you seeing that, Millie?
I have it under Hudson Medusa Brewing inks a deal with Holliston Distributor. That is from, it's a news. From November 2019. It might be a little outdated then.
Okay.
Just to get a comparison of size.
Okay. The other one I have up, Amy, is the commercial development overlay district. We had talked about adding commercial uses to industrial. Did you want to speak? Do you want me to share this? And do you want to speak to this stuff? Okay. Okay. Can everybody see the major commercial development overlay district doc?
Yes.
Okay.
So I just did that yesterday and sent it out yesterday because we've talked, I think we talked last year, we talked this year. There are a lot of, we talked about, are there any uses that could be allowed in industrial, because our industrial list is so small. And there are sometimes complaints about certain industrial uses. So we thought, well, what's a better use that maybe we could add to the industrial? So then applicants would come in and have a better selection. And so I just went in and I used the overlay that we already have, and I tried to change it to make it into a commercial overlay for the other zones. But it was just really an overall idea of what we could do, because there's two ways to do it. You could also just add certain uses in by just going to the use table and updating that. Maybe that's better than an overlay, or maybe this overlay is only good on like Barefoot Road and not all the different industrial zones. It was just an idea that there are two ways of doing it. And maybe the board has a feeling that they don't want to add commercial uses in industrial. I guess I just wanted to see, we've talked about it a little bit, so I just kind of kickstarted it. But I didn't know what board members think, and then maybe we should even open it up to the public in a meeting to see what the public thinks, whether it's the neighbors or what do they think? Do they feel that commercial uses would be welcome in their area of town, or not at all? I guess I was just trying to start.
Okay. What if something's highlighted, is that because you added it or you wanted to flag it?
Yes, I highlighted what I added to the overlay. Like I crossed out commercial recreation indoor because we added that at last year's town meeting.
Okay.
And I added in assisted living facility because it wasn't on the list. But I thought maybe that would be a use in the commercial that would bring in, and the industrial, that would bring in extra revenue and fit. But maybe it wouldn't fit.
Okay. All right. Any board thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'd be curious to find out maybe from financial boards. I don't understand that statement that Amy made, because usually your industrial land brings in more financial stuff than revenue than commercial does, like a restaurant. So you'd always want to see, when you're making such a significant impact, what impact it would have on your financial well-being. So I think that you could just go and add them. I don't know why you have to do an overlay. I actually don't even know why the planning board would want to do it when you have an implementation committee that's working on. And I get, the public will come and give input to this, but you also, Amy, want to bring in other boards and committees that have always worked along years alongside of us when we do overlays. So, I think you sort of maybe want to look at, are there other industrial uses that are not included in our industrial use table? And then look at, it just seems pretty limiting. I cannot see a deli shop at the value of industrial land ever opening up down there, but maybe if you had some sort of mixed use. But
I just took the other overlay as a example.
what other overlay?
This is the major commercial overlay where Wegmans is.
But that was designed specifically for Wegmans.
Right, that's why I
So
took
are you
this one.
suggesting like another Wegmans mall should be up on Bartlett Street?
No, this was just to get an idea of an overlay and to bring it out to the board. In my email, it said if we wanted to add commercial uses to an industrial zone, we could either do it through an overlay or through updating the use table. So this was just an example. It wasn't, I just wanted to bring it up for conversation today.
Yeah, I think you want to be pretty clear with the public that the commercial overlay at Wegmans was specifically designed for that shopping mall. And unless you're suggesting that you want another shopping mall the size of Wegmans to be over on Bartlett Street, that's why that overlay was designed that way. I'm not sure if you were on the board at the time.
No, I wasn't. That's why I was just, it was an idea, but I didn't say that we had to do it.
Okay.
And this, when I read through the overlay, it just talks about uses to add. And then in the second part, by special permit is where you could add more than one use. But the very top was permitted and it was like one item. But that's okay. Like, this is a board discussion. If it's probably easier to just add them by the use table, then I totally agree. This
Okay.
was just sent out as an idea because we had talked about it.
Other thoughts on adding commercial uses, either if that's done or how that's done?
I think I would be more in line with adding it as uses rather than an overlay, because I think an overlay may have a much different impact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would like to continue to pursue this. I would be interested to understand the differences in what square foot in industrial brings in tax revenue as opposed to, say, a restaurant or a hotel. I don't know if that's something we can figure out.
That is a good way to look at it. For like 60,000 square feet of property, if you put the different things. But the hard thing is with industrial, I think a hotel would bring in a lot more revenue than like a contractor yard. Like, they're all so different. And I also think a business office park would bring in more than a warehouse. But maybe there is a way to get what the tax revenue is if you build a 100,000 square foot office park versus warehouse versus, I don't know. I don't know if that's too much to ask.
So Kathy, question about the overlay component. And I really don't have a strong feeling either way, which way we would go, but is the purpose of the overlay to then get something in return? Or what would be an instance where it would make an overlay would bring some sort of benefit that adding to the use table would not?
Well, sometimes you want to use an overlay as a way you want to maintain what the original zoning is. So you let's just use this as an example, and I'll give you some thoughts I have on it after this. But using the Southwest corridor, okay, what you have is a lot of land that is still zoned industrial there. So if you wanted to say, if you wanted to maintain that, yeah, we want to have a mix there. We want it to be, you know, commercial and industrial, which I don't necessarily know is such a great idea because it's such different markets and tenants and traffic and customers, because you're mixing, you know, something that is customer friendly versus something that is a warehouse or an R&D facility where, you know, a lot of activity is happening there during the day, you know, a 9 to 5 type of thing. And then people that live around it love the fact that, you know, it's done when, you know, 5 o'clock comes and it's not there on Saturday and Sunday, or the you know, the side effects sort of a you know, something that's opened, you know, 7 days a week. Whereas with commercial, you know, property, and there's all sorts of commercial property. I mean, there's anything from, you know, something that's very small, you know, a restaurant use, all the way up to, as you were, you know, someone was talking about, you know, assisted living facilities, which is actually considered residential, but, you know, a hotel, some sort of, you know, sports complex, or, but the purpose of the overlay, or one of the purposes of an overlay, is that you want to retain your zoning, you know, underneath, so to speak. So in this particular instance, looking at Southwest, you know, the decision was made at that time that the boards wanted to maintain that land as industrial. I think a lot of it had to do with looking at, you know, some of the existing uses, such as the sand and gravel pit. But if you didn't do an overlay, you know, one of the things that you might want to look at is, well, should we rezone that? And again, just looking at the Southwest area, you know, does it make sense to rezone all of that industrial land? And it may very well make sense that land should be rezoned, and then sort of properly rezoned as to how you want to see that as a community grow. So that's why you would use an overlay district, is you want to retain what's underneath. So you want to give people the option. They can either do what's as of right, or you put an overlay district. In this particular case, the major commercial overlay district, some uses are allowed by right, and then some uses are allowed by special permit. So at that point, you know, several years ago, there was a decision made that, you know, a certain scale would be okay to allow by right. And then if something was, you know, went beyond that or was larger than that, then we need to take a look at it as a special permit. There's probably some conditions that need to come along because of the impact it's going to have, you know, for the area. I think in general, I think this is a good conversation and a good start to talk about, you know, do you want to, as a community, do you want to encourage other uses, whether it's more industrial type uses, or do you want to introduce some sort of commercial into the industrial districts? And I think it's a much bigger discussion, or a much longer discussion that needs to happen. And I think you really, my advice, my opinion is that you really should wait till this implementation committee, the master plan implementation committee, you know, gets going. They've had 2 meetings in 1 month. I mean, they're really just getting to know each other. One of their first assignments, just as an example, I mean, again, Millie and Amy are part of the implementation committee, but one of the first assignments was to take a look at everything that's been listed in the implementation chapter and rank those, bring those forward as a committee. We're going to discuss that in greater detail at the October 21st meeting, but I can tell you right off the bat, downtown is one of the ones that came up. There is no one talking about industrial development right now on the master plan implementation committee. That did not come through as anyone's. They were asked to do their top 3 overall rank recommendations and their top 3 short-term recommendations. Now, those are already listed. Those have already been established in the master plan. So that's what we're working from, is the master plan. So already what has happened, or what has risen to the surface, is the downtown, which is no surprise, and there's other topics. But I can tell you that industrial development is not something that has risen to the top. So I do not think that it's necessarily a wise move at this point to make any decisions and bring zoning forward at this year's town meeting about making, large scale changes without seeing what the implementation committee is going to come up with and suggest. They're eventually going to, feed out, sort of go back to all of the boards and say, these are the top 3 priorities that we've all agreed on, the top 3 recommendations. And, one of them might involve the planning board. One of them might involve DPW. One of them might involve, the historical commission. So those are the 3 things that all of these boards should be working on together.
So my question would just be, if industrial development doesn't rise to the top, then it's going to be a long time before they get to this. And in the meantime, if we have something like the sand and gravel company sell their land, we don't have anything but industrial there. So would we?
No, you have the major commercial overlay district.
Oh, it does hit that area?
Yes.
It hits that far?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. So just as a specific example for that, Carrie, I mean, that is
Right.
something that, everyone is very well aware of. For probably 20 years, I keep hearing, in 5 years we'll be out there. So, and they're still going strong. But that does exist. And I'm not saying that just because or that the final determination is now up to the implementation committee, but we've paid a lot of money and gone through a lot of meetings to get that master plan together, and out of it has come the implementation committee, and they need to be able to do their job.
True, but we need to be able to do our job, and if we can't wait until industrial development comes to the top of the list, because I just don't think it will. I think that downtown should be the focus, economic development, sidewalks, all these other things that should be the focus. Mike, it's a very valid point you're making. Do we need to rezone something? Do we want to do anything big? Maybe not, but can we do little things that just help us? Like, are there interim changes we could make, or the board wants to make? I have no idea. But I do think that I don't want master plan to be our be all end all, because we have been waiting. I've been hearing this since I first joined the board, that we're waiting for master plan, and we're going to be continuing to wait. A lot of ships might sail in that interim period that I worry about a little bit. So that's just my concern with that. I don't know how other board members feel in general. Are there steps we can take in the interim? What do we do?
Yeah, I don't think, just to sort of close out my comments, Carrie, and for the rest of the board, I'm not saying that, that you don't, look at zoning, you got 3 years off, while you wait for the implementation committee. But it's just, it's a big undertaking. And the town should be very proud of themselves for having this implementation committee and going forward with it, because a lot of times, communities will put together a master plan and then nothing happens with it, because it's just handed out to everybody. And, and Northborough took the next step to say, you know what, no, we want to implement this. We don't want it just to be sitting there. So we need to give it that time. It's, and time is what it takes. And again, they've met, they're meeting, they've got a schedule for the next 5 months. And I think you'll be hearing a lot from the implementation committee.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay, thoughts on how that impacts this, or what we want to do next?
After everything I just heard, I do agree. The overlay may be too major to do, and an overall change is probably too major, but I do think we stay open if there's a use, like just how last year we did it, indoor recreation, because a lot of towns were doing, you know, the indoor soccer, the teamworks, the 4 kicks, all the little things. So last year we did add indoor recreation to industrial. I guess if there is a use that other towns have in their industrial, or our residents come forth and they want to see in our industrial, then we can look at it that way. After learning more about the overlay, in my opinion, that we probably shouldn't go that way right now.
Okay. Other thoughts? So maybe what we can do is think about if we were to look at it for similar to what we did last year, if there are commercial uses. And then I guess the brewery will be a wild card as well, if that's allowed in industrial, and also whatever other districts that would go in. Maybe as a board action, just going through the use table and looking at anything like Amy did last year. Was that the year before? I think it was 2 years ago. No, that was last year. Now I can't remember. In any case, if we had empty warehouses, are there any good uses that would work? Or if we had the space or the land went for sale, any other uses that would just open it up a little bit? I think Anthony, I think you originally put out there opening up commercial uses, but I don't know if you had anything specific in mind at that time. Did you have anything specific in mind?
I don't have anything specific, and I still don't. I think that there's a lot of good ideas, and I think it does make sense to look at the use table. I'm not certain exactly what the right things would be.
Okay. All right. So for this one, why don't, if the board takes time to just look at the use table and maybe think about any uses that would work, or possibilities, and we'll regroup on that. And if it's nothing, it's nothing, but we'll at least take that look.
So currently the major commercial development overlay district is only specifically for the southwest cutoff area industrial, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, it's the way the bylaw is written is it's specifically in there describing the southwest corridor, or I forgot exactly what the verbiage is, but so another thing, just people want to kick this around in their heads. Amy, like she said, she started, this is a starting point. She put this together yesterday. I mean, one of the things you might want to look at in the bigger picture is, well, maybe it's not so much that that you need to come up with a new bylaw, but you might want to just look at, okay, what does the major commercial overlay district say? And maybe that bylaw just today, how it's written, is applicable for the other industrial areas. We have 3 industrial areas in town. So, but the reason why initially this focused on that area was, because we had anticipated that that was never going, the majority of that property was never going to be developed as an industrial piece of property. And for, up until, the development, the commercial development and the multifamily housing, there wasn't sewer or water there. So that's, a huge hindrance, which is why we don't see, a Marriott or a Residence Inn or, anything on our section of Route 9, because there aren't the, public facilities that could support it. So, that's something else that you want, that we need to take into factor when you're looking at where do you want to expand commercial development. You have to take a look at, again, what are the town services, are there water and sewer available, because a distribution facility, that has 5 full-time staff working there, and by the code needs 1 bathroom, that's a significantly different kind of septic system than you move a hotel into the industrial district, or you move a restaurant into the industrial district. Significantly different kinds of impacts and what they need for infrastructure.
Yep.
Okay, clarification on the commercial. Oh, go ahead.
And just going back to Kathy's comment about the implementation committee, one of the points on the implementation committee and their agenda item is to look for extending water and sewer within the community. So maybe at some point down the line, you have the opportunity to have a hotel. Do you know what I mean? So that's part of that long-term planning that I mentioned in the beginning that you need to look at, right? It might be great to have a hotel, but you can't have it there because you don't have the resources to have it there. But the implementation committee might look and see how you can get to that point where that might be attractive for an investor. That just is not happening yet.
Okay. Quick clarification on the current overlay district. So it says that it's in the vicinity of the Southwest Connector as shown on the zoning map. Are there actual lines somewhere that show that, so that if somebody came and said whether they're covered by it or not?
No, there wasn't any. With an overlay district, you don't physically show it. Excuse me, because it's an overlay district, so it's not a new zoning district. But that's where the description comes in of, the Southwest. So when you look at the Southwest, you see the Southwest portion of the town. It's zoned industrial, and that's what this is for.
But how would you not, what if, couldn't you extend it? Who says what I don't know, maybe, I guess that makes sense. I just on the groundwater overlay, I can look at the map and I see where the overlays are.
Well, right, because that's physically, again, even though, right, it's related to, to a scientific water draw down for the wells.
Okay, all righty. Okay, all right, so sounds like we need a little more information. The board needs to think a little bit about if we want commercial uses, are there any specific, or how do we want to move forward with this one? So that has a TBD.
Question, Kathy, is there sewer on Barefoot Road? You just muted.
Oh, sorry, I thought I was on. A portion of Barefoot Road, yes, has sewer. And that was all that was back in the early 1980s. That was part of a grant that the town applied for and received about economic development, industrial development. So that was very specific that sewer was brought up to that area, but it doesn't.
Which half? I'm just curious if it's on the 290 side or the other side.
Well, it's not so much that it ends before the railroad. So depending on which way you're traveling on, but I mean, if you come up Solon Pond Road and, take your left onto Barefoot,
yeah,
sewer is available initially there.
Oh, hi.
How many feet it goes up, I don't know, but we can find that out.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
And I will send an email to Tom to ask him about finances. He's our planning board rep to the financial committee. So I'll ask him about that question we had about industrial versus commercial. Okay, a quick one from me, the historical district possible bylaws. Norm had sent an email that there's no time sensitivity there, no need to do it. So I withdraw that. So we don't, unless anyone, I assume nobody wants to push forward despite hearing that they're not pushing. Okay. Millie, that's your understanding as well?
Yep.
Okay, so I withdraw that one. Also, let's see, I'm just gonna go on my list then. So sober homes, Millie, that's anything from you there?
I'm still just trying to gather whether there's been any change either legislatively or state-wise about definitions, what other towns are doing. It doesn't really seem like there's been a lot. So hopefully I'll get in touch with Bob about that and see if he's finding anything differently.
I can add to that, Millie. I actually specifically talked to Bob about that today, Bob Frederico, our building inspector.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been any new legislation, any changes to the building code or any other of the, like electrical, plumbing regarding sober houses. So that hasn't, not exactly sure what the possibilities were, but that hasn't gone anywhere. But in general, the use of the sober house use, that is something that's protected, under what's called the Dover Amendment, which is, in the state statute that there's, again, churches, schools, daycares, I think some sort of solar.
Agricultural.
Yeah, and the sober houses, the methadone clinics, the sorts of uses that people, bristle at initially, those are all protected uses under, again, what's always referred to as the Dover Amendment. So towns cannot zone against those. They cannot say that that type of use can only go in one district or it can't go in any districts. But, what the courts have said is that, reasonable regulations can apply to them.
Right.
So, when, just as an example, a couple of the churches in town over the years have done additions. So, they have had to come in for site plan review. The town in general couldn't say, no, you can't expand, we don't want that use anymore. But what the town can say is, we have a site plan process and you need to go through that site plan. We need to make sure that you have enough parking. We need to make sure that, looking at our setbacks. Now, recently, our particular setback came into question about a daycare facility in an industrial zone. And we were not successful in enforcing that particular setback. But again, the uses themselves are protected. So as far as the zoning, Millie, and I know you've talked about this for a couple of years, is it more that you're concerned about that there's public safety, the police, fire, or maybe not so much police, but I mean, as far as fire regulations, Board of Health regulations, because that's not anything that we can do through zoning. But say if a facility wanted to come into town, and I mean, we have plenty of, every community does, with their group homes all over our communities, and that blend in with the neighborhood. But say for just a sort of far out example, if some sort of facility wanted to come in that was starting out on raw land as opposed to rehabbing a house or something for individuals that would live there with support staff, that type of facility would again be allowed anywhere by zoning, but they would have to come through the site plan process. And again, you're not controlling the use, but you're looking at all of the dimensional requirements and setbacks, parking, lighting, that type of thing. So I don't know if there's something specific, Millie, that you are anticipating the zoning could regulate, or.
I honestly think, Kathy, it's more of the maybe a bylaw regulation, not as much zoning as you say that it really can be put up anywhere, but looking at what the safety, features could be, and the fact that these houses oftentimes have no oversight, no state regulation or certification is of concern. And I think that, to have some writing in place that might help people who want to start one or be involved or become under the care of one. There's an expectation of public safety for the tenants, but also for the town, just as you would maybe in any type of lodging or group home situation, whether it's a halfway house, or even something that comes to mind is something like a fraternity or sorority, where you have multiple non-family members living in a large group arrangement, that you just want to have some idea of how things are going and who who they answer to if you want to have that be managed. Safety is obviously, I think, a big thing.
So
Board
do
of
they,
Health, I don't know if Board of Health gets involved. Obviously, fire department.
so Kathy, are you saying even if a sober home comes in, they are already subject to site plan review or not even site plan review?
Well, if it depends on how one of these facilities, you know, I mean, just in general, I'll just refer to them as a group home, and I honestly don't even know if that's a correct terminology anymore. But a lot of time, group homes, like the agency will purchase, you know, a single family home in an existing neighborhood, and so that wouldn't go through site plan. You know, they're you know, they're just moving into an existing home, and they happen to have, you know, again, you know, 4 as an example, you know, 4 unrelated adults living there, but you know, but they are supervised and they're staffed there 24 hours a day. So something like that, you know, moving into just a home or building a home, you know, in town specifically for that purpose, you know, that wouldn't come through site plan. But and I'm going to use the term facility for lack of a better word, but if a facility, say that was, you know, housing, you know, 20 people, 30 people, there's a facility up on Whitney Street, right on the sort of corner of Whitney Street and Whitney Ave. And there are multiple people there. They don't live there, but it's an educational facility for I don't know what the affliction is. I don't remember actually, but that was an allowed, you know, they were allowed to go there. They chose an industrial zone, but we had them go through site plan. You know, it was a brand new building, needed parking, needed van drop off areas, that type of thing. So that went through site plan. But if someone is just, and a lot of times these agencies are on a much smaller scale, where they're either, you know, building a house or buying an existing house, that doesn't go through site plan.
Right.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So Kathy, if I'm correct, the property on Main Street that is a large group home did not go through any site plan approval by any boards in town. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of, there's a group home on Main Street.
I thought that's what was happening on the Main Street across from, I'm trying to think of where it is. It's down towards where they cleared down towards Marlboro Savings Bank. It's on the St. Mary side.
Oh, okay, on West
Yeah.
Main Street. All that I'm aware of
West
so far there is that they brought an A&R to the, you know, to the board. The A&R was signed because they developed, or they divided it into 2 properties. So it's 2 lots. So I don't know that they've even applied for building permits or who it is. I honestly don't know.
Right. So you see group homes across not even only our community, but other communities. And they actually don't go before the boards, right? It's this, they are a protected class and the state understands that, and they must have some guidelines they have to go through, because you do see things that changing. You see ramps put in or different types of things happening to a house to adhere to whoever the tenants are within the house. I would think that maybe because of Millie, you might have a concern about this. There is a facility that's down, I forget where the Westboro courthouse is, in Westboro. You know, you could certainly check with that facility there. That's considered to be a drug treatment center, you know?
Yeah, I think if it's the one I'm thinking of, that Spectrum.
Yes.
And I believe that that's considered a halfway house, which is a little bit different than a sober home.
Yeah.
So those places are regulated and they're covered by insurance and things like that. So they do have regulations versus a sober home, which is oftentimes where people have to go after their insurance covers their rehab and their progress. So what happens is people end up going into these more extended care options because they're physically, they've rehabilitated and they're recovered to some degree, but mentally, emotionally, psychologically, they're not prepared to go out into the not normal, but the regular world. So these types of homes oftentimes aren't really defined as a halfway house or a treatment facility. Oftentimes they're not getting really any treatment any longer. They're just trying to reintegrate into society in a more gradual manner.
But as Kathy indicated, they must be a protected class, because Kathy, didn't you say they are on the protected class list?
They
So
are.
they must in
Yeah.
some form need to fulfill guidelines with regards to fire safety, having smoke detectors in the house or whatever like that. I mean, that's just state, or the police departments or Board of Health. I mean, certainly I would think somebody who has had a complaint, they could call the departments and issue a complaint of their concerns.
They
I just
are-
don't know what, my
Yeah.
concern is as a board is, what are you gonna do for zoning of it, right? So are you just gonna do new construction of it? Or are you gonna do an existing home, which is maybe what you're seeing now, where they're going into existing homes and just, doing something within an existing home? And then if you do, are you just going to be rejected by the Attorney General's office, even if it goes at town meeting? Because the
Yep.
state has already said this is a protected class because they have disabilities, right? So I feel like maybe there is a concern there by residents, but is it a concern of new construction? Or, because as Kathy said, under new construction, you then ask them to come from the board for a special permit or, to site plan review, because not special permit because they're an allowed use, right? So it's site plan review. But if it's an existing houses that you see within neighborhoods that people are actually starting up sober houses and having concerns, I don't think that's a planning board issue. I think that's more of an issue within the various departments. Like, is it a fire issue? Is it a building issue? Is it a Board of Health issue? So, because I
Yeah,
think in the end, you're probably going to get rejected by the Attorney General.
To some degree, I think that's very possible. I just am looking at what some other towns have struggled with to try to provide it. It is considered a disability, but it's not as in people who can't really physically take care of themselves. So it's not as much of a structural element. It's more of a just
It's a mental disability. It's
yeah.
whatever disability it is, the state has granted them a protected class.
Yeah.
So I think that the staff is guiding us in saying that they're probably not suggesting that there's anything right now in zoning that we can do, that it needs further inquiry, either through the legislative body, or maybe you reach out and send a letter to the Board of Selectmen who oversee those other departments, the Board of Health or whatever, and see if there's any other ways that the departments in the town, because we're zoning, we're not in charge of departments. We're not in charge of the fire, Board of Health or police. That's under the purview of the Board of Selectmen, right? We're more on if something's new construction that's being built. So we've already been told that we can't, it's an allowed use. So if the problem that you're seeing that's occurring is in houses that are already built, there's nothing we can do.
So Millie, out of curiosity, have you seen in these towns any bylaws on the books, or there's no bylaws that we can even find anywhere?
I have seen some towns that have struggled to put bylaws in order to, and then they end up in court because you have a building inspector who's trying to enforce a bylaw or a regulation that may or may not apply to this situation. And I've seen cases end up in both cases, one in Brockton and one in Fitchburg, ended up basically coming out with two different outcomes, whether or not a building had to put in a sprinkler system. And I think it just depended on how the court ruled it, but not having something in the bylaws to go by has led to some issues with how to manage these facilities.
Okay, so how would you like to proceed? I mean, you have talked about this for a couple of years, so is it something where it's still worth, you want to have a conversation with Bob, or?
Yeah.
Okay,
I think so.
okay. Amy, Anthony, any thoughts from you?
I don't.
I don't know enough about it, but do you think we could get Bob at a future meeting, whether it be like our next meeting or mid-November, maybe mid-November, so we can ask him the questions we have with the bylaws if we have some questions?
Yeah.
Is
I mean,
that something like, Kathy, do we have to email Bob and request his presence at the meeting, or is it something you could ask him if you would join us?
Yeah, I can definitely, I didn't know if I was muted or not. Yeah, I can certainly ask Bob if he would be available. We just need to, so that he, would be able to come prepared. We just need to kind of narrow it down, maybe, at the end of your meeting, about what you wanted it is to ask him.
Okay. Well, it sounds like, go ahead.
I can come up with a list of questions that I have and send them out to everyone if they think that would be helpful, and then they can add questions if they want, or it doesn't matter.
It's a great idea. Okay. So Millie has questions. We just want to hear from Bob on this, and then we can settle on that one. So we have a TBD, another TBD.
Okay.
Signs, Anthony, signs was something you had brought up.
Yep, still reviewing. I'm not prepared tonight to talk about it.
Okay. All right.
Carrie, I know one of the things on the list is the Ridge Road property.
Yes.
And I just wanted to let the board know, I did meet with the applicant and his engineer yesterday.
Okay.
And so they are working on a bylaw, and they would, well, actually what I suggested is that they come to your meeting on the 21st, but obviously I needed to check with the board first about that. But as part of this discussion, they could come to the next meeting and talk about their proposal. What they're looking at right now is actually making some amendments, proposing some revisions to our existing open space bylaw. So I, said to them that we would need that, at least a week in advance. If they could get that to me, and that I would just verify with the board tonight if it would be okay for them to come and join that part of the discussion, as far as the possible zoning bylaws.
Okay. Is that something the board's agreeable to?
Are they still, Kathy,
Yeah.
are they still not agreeing to the preliminary subdivision plan?
Well, we actually didn't talk about the preliminary subdivision plan. We were more talking about their revisions that they would like to make to one of our existing bylaws. So I honestly couldn't tell you right now, Michelle, whether that, I want to see their proposal. But I honestly don't remember right now if that existing particular bylaw, calls for that yield plan. So that's, I consider that still on the table for sure. Whether that's
And
something.
what bylaw are they going after?
They're looking at, hold on just one second.
I think it's increasing the number of buildings.
Yeah, in our existing bylaw, there's a bylaw called the Open Space Residential Design. And I believe that that's the one that they're looking at. So as soon as I receive some information from them, I'll certainly share that with everybody. And then I still, if you just want, I can just hit the other one too. I actually, I need to respond to Aaron Hutchins. He sent me an email a couple days ago. The consultant that the GIS department was going to look at, or speak with about, looking at how we can sort of extrapolate out frontage for the piece on Brigham Street. So, we were able to put together all the parcels, but we don't have a way yet to narrow it down to the frontage. So that's still being worked on. So hopefully by the next meeting, not to make you think that we're just pushing this down the way, but it's a lot more involved than me looking at the map and saying, oh yeah, there's 6 parcels. So that's active. That's being worked on, and hopefully I'll have that information for your next meeting.
Okay. One other thing for you was the home occupation. Anything about that?
No, I actually, what Barb and I were saying today, there was one more thing that we were going to talk about. And then there you go. That was for me to clarify about the trucks or vehicles. So I'll keep that on my list.
Okay, so nothing there. So that's a TBD. And no other bylaws from staff. That was it. I didn't know if I thought at some point you were going to take a look.
I just have a couple myself, Carrie, that I haven't even put into writing yet. But that also was part of me meeting with Bob today, was for us to sit down and take a look at, like, one of the things we talked about today, just to give you an example of what's being discussed in-house. We concluded that we didn't need to do anything zoning wise, but one of the things that's coming up, or that's going to expire, is under the COVID regulations from the governor about outdoor seating for restaurants. Pretty much, that was, during COVID, where obviously people couldn't and didn't prefer to be inside. A lot of restaurants went outdoors. So a lot of across the board in Massachusetts, not just North Row, but a lot of things were waived, just automatically waived, of just trying to get these businesses to stay in business. But one of the things I touched base with Bob, who also works with the fire department. I talked with the town administrator's office, who issues the liquor licenses, and we have a really good system in place right now, that if any restaurant wants to come and expand, COVID or no COVID, but they decide that they want to set up an outdoor patio or out, some sort of outdoor seating, that it's all being reviewed by the various departments. And then if in fact, down the line, someone wants to do that and it involves like parking change, or they need to expand their parking, or changing well, actually, it's because mostly they're moving into parking areas. That would be something that automatically would come to the planning board now, today, yesterday, tomorrow, through the site plan review process. So we determined that there's not anything that we need to do with our zoning to address outdoor dining. So it's already taken care of by other departments that have to look at that again, regardless of COVID.
Okay.
So that's just one example where things we're talking about in our existing bylaw, do we need to do something to it? The ones that I have so far are just really, I'm not even going to bore you tonight. I'll put them together, but it's literally simple changes. Or if or where I've like seen it doubled up, someplace in the bylaw and it just needs to be changed.
Okay. So we also had the moratorium. So you were asking for any other towns that had imposed a moratorium or any reasons why, or
Yes, I did do some initial research on that in reaching out to some communities that I know that have had moratoriums in the past, including this town. You know, we had done a moratorium. It was, I think it ended up being a citizen petition, but that doesn't matter. But you know, on solar, that was one of the things. So the you know, what you need to do, what I talked to an attorney by the name, his name is Mark Bobrowski, and Mark is the author of I mean, he's just about at every, you know, planning conference that's ever been held as a guest speaker. But Mark also is the author of what's called the Land Use Handbook, which is something that, you know, every community uses. So anyways, I reached out to Mark just in general, asking about moratoriums and what is it, or is there anything that a town needs to do in advance of preparing or proposing a moratorium, and the work is afterwards. So you can go ahead and propose. This is just in general. You can go ahead and propose a moratorium, but part of your presentation and you know, discussion at town meeting is that, you know, if the moratorium on whatever it is approved, you know, you're committing that you're going to study that, whatever the issue is. If it's, you know, if it's the town has been inundated with you know, multifamily housing, and you know, and it's causing a severe impact to the school system and you know, to daycare providers or something, you know, you would then need to, if you impose a moratorium on multifamily, you would then need to, you know, spend the max that you can do is 18 months. That's what the states through the courts have allowed. But they try to get you to, the courts try to encourage you to, you know, within a year. So for your next town meeting, you're bringing forward some changes to address what, you know, what your concerns were about why you needed this moratorium. So you have about a year to, you know, come up with a plan as to how you're going to address it. Now, just specifically looking at, you know, and again, I know that it's just been a general discussion, you know, amongst the board. Again, I go back to the master plan. We created a master plan. The board adopted the master plan. We now have an implementation committee, and to then now say in the middle of that process, you know, we think that we need a moratorium on a particular kind of development is really contrary to, you know, this whole master planning process. So it might again be something that you want to talk to the implementation committee about, and also talk to other boards about, you know, particularly the Board of Selectmen, if you know, if people have all of these concerns that you know, we don't want to see temporarily, you know, growth in the industrial districts, or what kind of growth do you want to see in the industrial districts? So even though you don't need to do a study beforehand, you know, obviously you have to have that, you know, multiple discussions about why it is that you want that moratorium, and then what you think that moratorium is going to accomplish, you know, and then what are we going to do during that moratorium period?
Okay, so there are two moving pieces with this district. One, we talked about the moratorium, and then also we talked about definitions. That was the second piece of that.
Yeah,
So
but
I
Amy
guess,
had,
okay.
no, I was just going to say, yeah, Amy had brought some of those definitions.
Oh, that's right, Amy, you had sent from Sutton. They had some different definitions that you provided with the board. So we have two different components here. It's just thoughts from the board on what makes the best sense for, you know, is it a moratorium? Is it the definitions? Is it both? Is it neither? Any thoughts from the board?
Well, I do think that it's worth looking into to some degree to find out what the process is, regardless of whether we continue to go forward. I think, partly we're trying to address a current urgent situation to the point with a master plan. I'm not sure that it necessarily conflicts with the master plan, but I mean, I guess I think it's still worth looking into.
I see this as something to tapping the brakes on a problem, an urgent issue we have at hand, and whether that gets rectified later through the implementation committee or not, hopefully would, is a different matter. I think right now we're just trying to slow things down so we can get our hands wrapped around a current trucking traffic issue.
If we were to go, go ahead.
Can I just ask a question? You want to put no growth in industrial because of warehouses or trucking issues? And what do you guys, I'm trying to grasp what you guys are trying to think about what you're doing here. Millie just said, well, we have an urgent crisis here. So what's the crisis? And then Anthony said, we've got a trucking traffic problem. Is this all uses in industrial, or is this just one use in industrial that you're going after?
I think we just talked about doing the trucking moratorium, although I guess we often put trucking and warehouse together. So I think it would probably be the trucking and warehouse. What is the warehouse? Did we talk about that, or just trucking? I guess both are up. I mean, it's up to board discussion.
Are you talking about no trucks in industrial land to travel through? Or are you talking about a trucking center?
No,
Like,
it'd be a
trucks
moratorium.
traveling?
Well, obviously trucks would be able to travel through there. It would just be a moratorium on the use until we get a handle on what's happening there. So if we were to get a new application, well, we wouldn't get, in the period of the moratorium, there wouldn't be any additional applications.
For warehousing distribution, right?
Was it that?
I think it was that. And
If you look at the page 738, distribution and transportation uses has two definitions. There's a warehouse and there's trucking, rail, or freight terminal. What we've had is applications always for warehouse, but they always end up, not always, I shouldn't say that, but some of them have ended up to be distribution and trucking. So both of those fall under the definition. So if you were going to do a moratorium, you'd probably have to have a moratorium on both warehouse and trucking, rail, or freight terminal, just to get a grasp and see how the board and other town boards maybe want to go forward.
Mm-hmm.
If people watch the selectmen meeting, there's a lot of discussion.
Yeah.
Carrie, if just, if you're specifically looking at, if your concern is that there's a trucking issue or a traffic issue, I mean, I think we need to be very specific. Well, what is that? And is there a way to address it within existing bylaws or adding bylaws? Or is I think it's a big jump myself to go to a moratorium, but I also think, the selectmen have been, but I think this has been on, I don't attend all of their meetings, but I think it's been on just about every single, agenda of theirs. And the Department of Public Works has put together, I think numerous memos on what is being done within at least their department, as far as, whether it's, striping the road, the truck exclusions, the Jake, I'm not even sure that's the right term, but the Jake brakes bylaw that was approved last year. So I think, again, I think it needs to be defined on what this problem, what you perceive this problem to be, and then are there ways that it can be addressed or needs to be further addressed if what the selectmen have been doing with the DPW, isn't addressing it, or you don't think that that's enough.
Well, one huge thing is enforcement isn't being, so we still get emails about enforcement. We still get emails about, whether you brought up the Jake breaks. I think an email just came through on Jake breaks. So in addition to the issues at hand, we don't, for the bylaws we have on the books, we're having a problem enforcing because of whatever snag, like for example, the turning, Bob would have to be sitting there watching it, seeing it in real time to enforce it, or, it's so difficult to enforce it with what we have. Do we need to evaluate enforcement? Do we need to look at, I don't know, is there something we could do differently, or are there different, I'm not sure. I guess it's a good point. Do we bring up all the problems on the table and figure out how we solve it? Maybe that's the next iteration of this.
Yeah, and I think that, not that two boards, can't be discussing the same thing, but I mean, I don't think a lot has to be reinvented. I mean, I think we can be doing this in conjunction with the selectmen, or looking to see what the selectmen have done so far. Like I said, I don't attend every selectmen's meeting, so I don't know if some of you do, and you've seen what and heard what they have done to date. I do know that there is a significant increase in compliance with the companies that people were having issues with. But I don't have the numbers here for you tonight, but I know that's something, again, that the selectmen have been working with.
Yeah.
Have been working, with those companies.
Okay. Other thoughts on this?
If you want to ask a question from the Board of Selectmen that's been appointed to the planning board, Scott Rogers is right sitting in the audience and can participate, and he can give you input now.
It's
He's
Jason.
been appointed
Jason
by
is
the
our
planning
liaison.
board. He's by the Board of Selectmen as liaison to the planning board.
Actually, I thought that once too, Michelle, but Jason said it's him. Even though Scott's watching the meeting, Jason told me that he is the liaison to the planning board.
Okay, well, but there's a Board of Selectmen sitting watching. I mean, they could give you input.
So that's okay. I actually just
Okay.
want to, I've been watching the meetings, and I think they're doing a lot for this. I'm concerned about on the zoning side of it. They aren't able to, that enforcement piece of it is, so we've talked before on this board about if we're going to place conditions on an application and they're not being enforced, what peace of mind do we have in placing those conditions, and what is the impact of that? So if we're still getting these applications and we're still putting conditions on and they're still not being enforced, does it make sense to continue to take them on? Or do we need some sort of moratorium where we can solve this problem, get all of our pieces in a row, whether it's the selectmen, they have their component to it, we have our component to it. Do we need to level set this, what's happening in these districts? Specifically what's happening in the areas that abut the residential areas, and that's causing a lot of trouble. I don't know, maybe a moratorium's too far. But it seems like we haven't been able to solve this otherwise, and applications will still continue to come in. And so the problem is getting worse, or it could get exponential with each application that comes in. So do we need to do anything? What can we do? I think it's something.
We could even discuss it up until January. Do we want a meeting where we talk about what the issues we think? Do we need definitions? Do we need this?
Right.
And then like we did with duplexes, with the duplex moratorium, when it came time to town meeting, we didn't have all the answers. So we had a duplex moratorium. So if we make a list of what all our concerns are, how, and maybe there's just not enough time. Like, how do we look at these concerns before January, February?
Yeah, well, why don't we could start with that? I mean, certainly we have a history of emails of concerns that have come in. pretty much weekly.
Mm-hmm.
So if we start with those concerns and sort of, add our own concerns to it, maybe that's just a discussion that we can have as the next step of this and decide, are our concerns at a level that warrants some sort of moratorium, or can our concerns be answered in other ways? To Kathy's point about, is there already a bylaw in the books, or can we tweak something? Millie, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I do think that it doesn't hurt to start with some of the definitions.
Mhm.
And maybe teasing out when people are making their applications, what they're applying for, so that we have better insight and knowledge as to what's coming.
Amy, you sent over information from Sutton.
Right. And I don't, I should have been ready to talk about that tonight. I can, but one of the conditions, they had a list of 36 conditions that they put on their warehouses. And one of them had to do with an empty warehouse. So if they got an application for a warehouse that didn't have any occupants, once occupants started occupying the building, they had to come back in front of the planning board. And they asked for a new traffic study. They asked for mitigation, depending on what and who occupied those buildings. So it wasn't just an empty warehouse that all of a sudden it couldn't change. Like, there were definitely conditions on there to bring the applicant back.
So this was the you shared this document with the board that had, this was the 36 different conditions.
Yep. So maybe that's something, if people haven't had time to look at, we read some of that. But then it goes back to enforcement. Like, we're talking about how we add conditions, but we can't enforce them. I also started looking at different towns, and they added more than just a fine. And I don't want to penalize companies, and I'm not even talking about an industrial warehouse. This could be anything, but they went as far as, if the penalties, like the fines, weren't being paid, they had a clause in their bylaw where the building enforcement officer would pull the certificate of occupancy, so they lost their permit to run their facility. I could share that too for next time. It was just, I was looking through enforcement in other towns to see how most people had the $100, $200, $300 fine. And then it was Wellesley who added, they could pull the certificate of occupancy if they had someone who wasn't following conditions or the bylaws.
Any of the board members from these other towns? Do you know any of the board members from these other towns to see?
No, I was going through for the groundwater that I'm gonna talk to later, but I actually looked at 90 different committees and different bylaws. I was just looking through enforcement, but I don't know anybody in Wellesley now. And I don't know if it works.
Right. I'm just curious as to how they feel the enforcement is working for them.
Right. I didn't ask. I just saw it.
But Kathy, go ahead.
Oh, but we could call them if it was something we were interested in, to see if it actually worked.
Just curious.
Did we hear back on the common driveway, the special permit with FedEx and Amazon? What town council was getting back to?
No, I haven't. I have not heard back from him on that. I'll follow up on that. He actually called just before our meeting tonight. Whether it was about that or not, I don't know, but I'll follow up with him tomorrow.
Okay, no problem. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That just popped in.
Oh, nothing. And it's nothing I would really ever want to do to somebody, but it's just something they had on their bylaw list. I mean, on their bylaws.
And that you also sent us definitions that.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So for this one, for next time, why don't we consider the problems at hand? Maybe look at those definitions of what other towns are doing. We talked about possibly maybe if there are ways we needed to break it out differently or update it. So let's look at the definitions. Let's think about the problems at hand. And I think that's it for that one.
And maybe when Bob's here too, we could talk about enforcement when we talk about bylaws.
Mhm.
See
Okay.
if he has any ideas.
All right, that's a good idea.
Ms. Maselli also had sent a letter about enforcement, so it would probably fall into the same thing. I think she sent it to the whole board about an enforcement problem she was having. And that would be another question for Bob is, if there's an enforcement issue on the weekend, who do you call?
Mhm. Okay.
Do you know, Kathy?
No, it's the police. If there's, I mean, that's who's in town 24 hours a day. So
Right,
they'll,
but the enforcement isn't criminal, it's civil. So would the police even?
no, they wouldn't be, they could just take the report and then they would provide it to, whichever appropriate department, come Monday. I mean, it's
Okay.
just how, the town works. I mean, there isn't a building inspector or zoning enforcement officer, on call like there is for, police and fire.
Right, and the dog officer. Is that what they do on the weekends too?
That I don't know.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Amy, did you want to jump into your groundwater committee? You mentioned that you're doing some research for that.
Sure, that's what I did, is I did some research for the groundwater and I actually looked through committees. I got to 90 out of the 351 towns to see what type of committees they had and if any other town had a groundwater committee. And the only one that did was Sherborne, and they just started it this year. And what Sherborne did was they actually go above and beyond where they do a highly detailed analysis. So, and try to protect their groundwater, whether it's a turf field. They did research into what type of crumb is used for the turf field so it's safer on groundwater. They had discussed one application, and the way that they report back is they say their groundwater committee has no serious concerns. And when thinking about ours, the way we do get a report back for the groundwater committee, they're advisory, but the memos come back saying they take a vote. The groundwater advisory committee votes to recommend approval. And whether they say it's a motion to approve or a motion to recommend approval, it's more of a legal liability for the town and the boards. Like, I was thinking, I know I had mentioned maybe we don't need the groundwater committee, but if as a board we want to discuss, keeping the groundwater committee, because it would be an important committee to protect our groundwater, maybe we want to list out what we hope to get for recommendations, because they're advising the special permit granting authority about whether they think it's safe on the groundwater. But I also think it's very important that they do not vote, because they are an advisory committee. And it should be more like what the other groundwater committee did, was the groundwater committee has no serious concerns. But if the special permit granting authority does approve, we would recommend the following conditions. Because I do think the conditions are very helpful, but there shouldn't be two boards that either approve or deny a groundwater decision. That should fall upon the special permit granting authority, which is what all the other 89 towns did that I looked at, and even 90, even Sherborne, they did not vote, because it's up to the special permit granting authority to vote on whether or not to approve a groundwater special permit. So as an advisory board, they, even in our bylaw, it states they're supposed to make findings and recommendations, but I don't think the recommendations should be whether to approve or deny.
So what you're saying, does that constitute a bylaw change or something like, what does this look like? If we were to say, here's what we expect, is that something that's a bylaw change or a discussion, or what does that look like?
Yeah, probably more, not a bylaw change, maybe. I was thinking more, maybe a memo to the Groundwater Committee, or chair to chair, you could talk to the chair. Because originally I'd said, maybe, we didn't need the Groundwater Committee because there's there's two special permit granting authorities, and they were advisory. But after thinking about it, I do think the Groundwater Committee adds a lot by reviewing the applications before they come to the boards. And so I was just trying to look into it. I was trying to see what the other towns do.
Mhm.
And I was trying to think hard on what is the best for our town. But I do think advisory committees should not be voting,
Mhm.
because they're only supposed to be providing recommendations or advice. And it's a legal liability if two boards are voting on the same thing. And those are just my thoughts. I hope I got them out clearly and it's not too confusing. And I know I've definitely talked to Jason in the past, and he agrees that it's an advisory committee, and they even tell the applicants now that in no way does our discussion give you approval for the special permit granting authority.
Mhm.
But I do think it's the way that the memos are written and the votes are taken that could cause an issue.
Anthony, as our groundwater rep, any thoughts on that? To put you on the
So it's an interesting point, because in our last meeting, I made a motion to deny, which was told by the chair that we do not deny. We either recommend or we don't recommend. And whether that's new or not, I can't say. But I'd say the current state of the board is a position to either recommend or to not recommend. However, they still vote, which I guess kind of makes sense.
And to me, not to interrupt, but it seems like semantics. When I did go back and watch it, and for the second one, they don't vote to approve, but they vote to recommend approval. So in a way, if you are even a court situation, whether you vote to approve or you vote to recommend to approve, it's pretty similar.
Kathy, were you trying to say something?
Yeah, just to clarify, all the advisory boards in town, I mean, and the two that I deal with, and one that I deal with, very specifically, the Design Review Committee, both of those boards, as long as they have been in existence, and every time staff meets with a new person that comes onto those boards, it is made very clear that these are advisory boards. So there's no question amongst staff or amongst the board members that they are a permit granting authority. Both of those boards know they're not, but they have to vote. They have to advance the project. So they both boards know that they are making a recommendation. As Anthony mentioned, I wasn't, I don't attend the groundwater meetings, but I mean, he made a motion to deny and was, just, educated that that's not what the board does. So they don't, both those boards know that they are not granting any permits. They know that what they provide as a recommendation is that it is a recommendation, and either special permit granting authority board can go against those boards. I mean, they have every right to do that as a special permit granting authority. Typically the boards won't, because the advisory boards have followed the process and have met with the applicants and have met with the applicants multiple times. So I just want to clarify, I mean, there's no confusion on boards, on the Groundwater Advisory Committee, right in their title, and the Design Review Committee. They know that they are not issuing a permit.
Right. Amy, you have something?
Yes, this isn't me blaming the advisory committees. It's just the way it's worded, maybe in the decisions.
Mhm.
When I looked at older decisions from the design review, it would say in, say it was a decision for something on Barefoot Road. It said that the design review met with the applicant on these 3 dates. But lately, the decisions say the design review recommends or voted to approve the site plan. I think it's all in the semantics and the wording. Like, it can be like the design review, yeah, they met certain times and they moved it forward, but the design review doesn't really have the authority to vote on the site plan because the site plan is approved by the special permit granting authority. And I think it's not blaming the design review or blaming the Groundwater Committee, but I think it's the way the memos are written or the votes are taken. It's how to move it forward without it being a legal liability to say.
Amy, can I ask, like, who's confused?
Yeah.
I've never
I think
heard a
that has to
single,
be-
I've never
I think
heard
that
a
would be-
single board member or applicant say that they were confused.
Oh, no, the
Yeah.
applicants will say they approved it, groundwater approved it, or I've heard
But
that.
they,
multiple times.
but they know that, I mean, and you may say it's semantics and we're not going to teach people how to speak at meetings, but I mean, they, you know, there's absolutely no question that those are advisory boards.
But would a
No, I think
judge,
that's-
I mean,
Right.
there's just, we've never heard a complaint from any applicant like, oh, I thought the Groundwater Committee, you know, approved it and then the ZBA denied it. You know, what's going on with that?
Yeah,
No,
so
they-
Amy, you know,
I think,
I've been on the design review committee for many years, and there were times, they were always advisory, they always knew. I don't understand the comments that you're making. I think they're false. But I'll tell
Oh,
you
I
right
don't think
now, there were
that.
times when it was on design review, and the design review would bring recommendations to the planning board, and maybe someone would say, well, I prefer this, because they were the permitting authority. And so they were able to override it and say, okay, let's have a fence here instead, or let's do that, because they had the final approval. And of course, when you're on a committee, you're asking for a vote. You're trying to figure out from the committee, are we all in agreement that we want this fence to be black? Can we move forward to the next subject matter? I mean, I totally disagree with some of the statements that you made on that, because we never, ever gave anyone the impression on design review that their application was approved before the board.
Well, it's
And
interesting
maybe you're
because they've
talking
been,
about maybe you're talking about groundwater. So maybe you need to discuss it with groundwater. But I'm talking about design review. It's not a true statement.
well, so it's interesting because I remember even explicitly, we had an applicant come in who wanted to do stone. And the board, the design review said do stone, and the planning board said, why don't you do mulch? And there was confusion by the applicant that it was already approved by design review, that design review approved stone. So they didn't know if they actually could use mulch instead. So I definitely recall times where it's been confusing, and or the language of approval has been there and has been stated over and over again or written in a decision. I don't know if the voting piece maybe still has to happen, that could be so, but I have known specific instances where there's been a confusing issue or stated approval.
Well, that's according to the chair, right? So you can decide on that as you go through. Do you want stone? Do you want mulch? But what you're saying is that these advisory committees are not saying to applicants, well, here your permit's been approved.
No, I'm not
Right.
saying that. I'm saying an applicant came in and thought design review had approved one thing and didn't know if the planning board had the ability to say, no, you don't have to do that. So there's an example of confusion with the applicant that they think it is an approval, or they state it, even if they don't think it, they state it. And
Well, it has been approved by the design review committee is coming forward.
but you
with these
recommended it. You did.
recommendations.
That's
Right,
case in
so,
point.
I mean, so what if he's confused? I mean, that's the chair's role to say to the applicant, well, would you like to have mulch, right? I mean, I don't know what you're referring to and what application you're referring to with regards to that. But
109 Main Street.
which is what?
The green building, the sideways building on Main Street. It's just an example of a confusion that transpired with the language of approval or what's happening. I mean, I don't know. I think it's a valid point. I don't think.
I
do
can't,
wonder.
if we could eliminate confusion from our jobs, from every single one of your jobs, I mean, come on. This can't be any more straightforward, that these are advisory boards. The boards receiving their memos know that they're advisory boards. The applicants know they're advisory boards. I spend half. I mean, if it's 15 hours to 20 hours a week meeting with applicants, saying the first thing that you need to do is you need to meet with the advisory boards. They're advisory to the planning board and to the zoning board of appeals. They don't make decisions. You need to go to the special permit granting. I mean, it's every day, folks. I just think this is a big discussion about nothing.
I think
I don't know.
for me to get to the bottom of it, I think we need an executive session, because the example that I have needs to be discussed in executive session. And I would like to, I think we're probably going to have executive session again before the end of the year. So my example for why I am bringing this forward would have to be discussed there.
Okay.
And I don't think it's crazy.
Anthony, any thoughts from you? Or Millie, you haven't weighed in.
I do think that some of it is worth discussing. It sounds like on the groundwater committee thing that might be a procedural change as far as how you verbalize a comment or a concern or a recommendation versus, maybe approval or disapproval.
Anthony, anything from you? Oh, you already weighed in. You did weigh in. I'm sorry. You're welcome to do it again.
No, the thing that's on the top of my brain right now is also something that would have to be an executive session. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's what's in my head as well. Okay.
So can I just, as a board member, you're asking to go into an executive session that we have no knowledge about what it's about? And that means you're asking to have the attorney weigh in on something? Can you tell the other board members, Amy, what your concern is? Is it a property? Is it an application? What are you concerned about?
If you just, Michelle, if I could just piggyback on that, if their executive session is to discuss something that is, that could, the public discussion of it could be detrimental to the board's position. So if you're talking about a decision that's a public document, and you have a question about one of the conditions, you can say it right now. That's not an executive session. Those are public,
I think
those
what
are
I have
public.
to say, I think has to go into executive session with Attorney Dineski, because it does have to do with litigation.
So we're litigating something that the advisory board said?
Well, no, it's a discussion about it. It's a question, but I really don't want to ask it publicly. I can bring it up to you, Kathy, maybe tomorrow off camera and ask you if you think it should be an executive session, but I really don't want to say it right now for that concern.
Okay.
Okay. All right, let's leave it at that. I think the only other thing I have is we talked about this and I wrote it down. I'm not sure if it's still on two things I don't know if it's still on the radar. Amy, you had dark skies.
Yeah, I sent out a lot of information on that, but I don't feel the need to bring it forth at town meeting this year because it is new to a lot of people. And maybe it is something that can be discussed during the master plan implementation.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're withdrawing dark skies?
Yep.
Okay.
Can I just make a comment on that?
Sure.
I think Amy, I haven't gone through your dark sky. I mean, I think we're all relatively familiar with dark skies, but I think that's something that we could probably, not that you have to discuss it at every meeting, but if there's certain things like in the dark skies bylaw or suggestions or whatever, this agency or this organization that exists about dark skies, if there's something in there that like it has, they suggest that it's a certain kind of lumen. I mean, I'm out of my
Yeah.
territory here. We're talking about light bulbs, but
Yeah.
if they recommend something like that, okay, I mean, that's just, I can't, it's like not even basic because I don't know what I'm talking about. But if it's, let's just say it's something about like the wattage in a light bulb, that with dark skies or not dark skies, I mean, that's something like you and the Zoning Board of Appeals as a special permit granting authority when you're doing a site plan review, that's something that you can ask an applicant. I mean, that's all part of the discussion. So I just want to let you know that you don't, some of these things you don't have to wait for a bylaw, such as like dark skies. There are things that you could say, hey, as you're meeting with the applicant, would you consider, this kind of lumens, or, I mean, because we've had a couple applicants that have said to you, that our lighting complies with dark skies. So, it's something that either that firm, like that engineering firm, is promoting to their clients, or that client, has decided as a company, yeah, that's how we're doing our parking lots, or that's how we're doing our lighting. So, so there might not be pushback that you think that there might be without having.
Well, no, I did think it was quick, and it could even be a footnote, or it could be like a criteria under special permits where it must be dark sky compliant, because a lot of people, not residential, but for businesses, a lot of people are pushing dark skies compliant, and most companies do it that way.
Yeah.
But when I brought it up earlier in the spring, Michelle said, you're bringing up something we haven't discussed it as a board. So that's why I was trying to bring it up and discuss it as a board and send out information. That was my whole reason behind it, bringing it up. So I thought by sending out the information, then maybe if there is someone who doesn't know what dark skies is, they could read it. And then, like you said, when there's an application, we can ask for it to be dark skies compliant.
Okay, so it sounds like withdrawn as a bylaw, but still an option in the future, Kathy. It sounds like that's what you're saying. We could still request it. It doesn't have to be a bylaw.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes under the big umbrella of, what you can condition, how you can condition a property.
Okay, so dark sky is withdrawn.
Yep.
Okay. We also had conversion only in downtown. Amy, you had brought this up. Was this still on
Yeah,
your
that that went along with the historical. So
okay.
If Norm's all set for now, then that can also be tabled, and that could come up with master plan too.
Okay, so withdrawn. Okay. The last thing is actually use. I think this is the last thing. I don't have anything else on my list. It's just the use variances. So obviously this is something that has been attempted a couple times. I haven't reached out to the ZBA yet formally to just, I wanted to mention it to them. It's obviously a big thing. It would be a big ZBA item. So I was going to reach out to them and just get some feedback on that. Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts on that from this board?
The only thing I would, well, not the only thing I would say about that, but I mean, as part of the reaching out to the ZBA and if the boards want to move forward with this, whether it's this year, next year, whatever, I think, one of the things that we need to do is, take a look at, what kind of use variances have been approved in the past. Have a lot of people applied for like a specific kind of use variance. So again, is that something, if those are continuously granted, then is that something that, the bylaw should be changed? So, if they've been applied for 10 years and the ZBA grants this use variance, well, then I guess it's okay for that particular zone. I mean, so you gotta, there's gotta be some, I mean, with any bylaw, but, we gotta do some back research on this.
I know you did that big spreadsheet for us before. And at the time, I think the biggest variance or the most frequently granted variance was related to like a dimensional, like a sign or something.
Probably, yeah.
So I don't know if the data, obviously I don't want to look at a spreadsheet that's a couple of years old, but do you think that we've trended in the same path? Like we're looking at, mostly dimensional variances over uses, or have you, just
Yeah.
anecdotally?
Yeah, I mean, and that's, a dimensional variance, I mean, that's what a variance is all about. That's different than a use variance.
Mhm.
A use variance is just that, it's about a
Mhm.
use. So, I mean, dimensional variances, that's something that's at, just about every single ZBA meeting, if someone is seeking
Right.
some sort of dimensional setback, a variance. But I'm just saying in the big picture, if you want to be talking about use variances, part of looking, historically, what has been granted. And then, taking a look again at the use table of like, okay, are there things on here that that we have either prohibited in the past, but now maybe people feel differently, I mean, just like anything, obviously there's some research that has to go on here.
Okay, what's the best way to get access that information? Is that like something that's like,
Well,
who's track of that?
it's all in my office.
Okay, should I just come in and peruse through your office, or?
All these decisions are online, if anyone wants to do this for fun, but
Well, I think we have up to a certain point covered anyway, so.
right.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we've again, like every single one of you, there's so many things on the to-do list, and that can certainly be added if this is a priority of the boards. Just.
No, I can actually, I don't mind looking. I want to go back to that spreadsheet anyway, and then I'll look, the decisions are online, so I'll just look. And I think over the last few years, kind of have a sense of what those actual use variances were.
Yeah. And again, they're not, like you were saying, Carrie, there's not I'll be surprised if my memory is, well, I won't be surprised if my memory fails me, but I don't think there's been a lot of use variances that have been granted, but.
The ones that pop into my head, the use variances that are being asked for are on groundwater lately.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, especially, I mean, in groundwater 1, if someone wants to pursue, if they've got property that's industrial and they have groundwater 1, and they don't want to build a house, a single family house, then that's their only option, is to pursue a use variance in area 1.
So does it take a long time for you to sort them, and just, because for me, I tried to look up variances online and you have to go through them one by one, I think.
Yeah, I have to do the same thing.
You have to do the same thing.
We don't keep a tally, and add to it at every single meeting. We go to the case files, and, we have to put together a spreadsheet.
Okay, I just didn't know if there was an easier way.
So I don't mind doing that actually, but what, that spreadsheet you sent us a while ago, would you mind resending it? Do you have that handy somewhere, so that I can just take from that period of time? Or I must have saved it somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, Carrie, you don't have to do that. I mean, I'm your staff. I mean, we can do that.
I don't mind actually. I would like, it's fine. It's not it'll be a fun project for me. I'm just trying to figure out if I have the
Yeah, no, I can send it. I mean,
okay.
It has to be somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great. All right, so we have a little more research needed there, and I think that's it. Did I miss anything? Michelle, you don't have any bylaws up on the table this year, right?
I don't.
Okay. Did I catch everything? All right, so just things that are withdrawn at this point. Historical district withdrawn, dark skies, and conversions only in downtown. And there may be additional coming from staff. Outdoor seating has been reconciled.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, we have the next, oops, I'm in the wrong agenda. The next planning board meeting is
October 19th.
October
And then
19th.
I had just sent out, if anyone caught it, I sent it out in the material from Amy, but I just added that there's no meeting on the 2nd.
Okay. Great. And the ZBA meeting, is anything there that we need to
I had sent out, I think it was just 2 applications. There's 4 applications. I think there's 4 hearings. One of them was continued. But one of the applications that I sent to you was, the address is 300 West Main Street, and which is, you know, an existing office complex. And so there's a nail academy, you know, fingernail academy, that school that wants to, you know, use some vacant space that's over there. So that's, and they're in a groundwater, I think it's 2 or 3. So they need to come for a special permit regarding, you know, the products that they use. Any nail salon does, actually. And then one of the other applications I sent to you, I'm drawing a blank.
King Street.
I'm sorry, what?
King Street.
Oh, that's right. Yep. King Street is, that is a special permit that was granted, special permit and some variances that was granted a couple years ago for an assisted living facility. And the original application was for 66 units or beds. We called them units, but 66. And within the same square footage, the developer, because he now is going to hook up to town sewer, he wants to expand the number of units that he has to 88. And part of that is putting in a memory care facility. So because it's a change in the decision, because the decision from the ZBA was specifically written for 66 units, and he wants to change it to 88. So that's before the ZBA. And then there's a groundwater line question coming in on Lawrence Street. So that's for a single family, I believe it's a single family house. And then the continued one was the 200 Bartlett Street, the Devereaux Corporation, Devereaux Company, that will, if they get their variance, if they receive a variance from the ZBA, you know, then they come to you for site plan review and special permit for the warehouse use.
Contractor yard.
I'm sorry, what?
A contractor yard, right?
Oh, yeah, contractors. Yes, yeah, contractors.
Warehouse on the brain, right? But I was just had a question on King Street. How do they go from, I didn't look at it, but how did they go from 66 to 88? Are they just making smaller units?
I think something to do with the memory care units are smaller units. And the first floor is now what he's proposing as memory care. So yeah, I think it has to do, and the state regulates like how, like what's the square footage of these units, of each one of these units. So so he's able to increase the number, but you know, particularly because he's connecting to sewer.
But the site plan doesn't change at all.
No, he's not changing the site plan, the size of the building. We've asked him to do some parking calculations, even though, you know, memory care facility occupants don't have cars. But we've asked for, you know, revised parking calculations. So.
Okay, any further questions on that? All right, motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, Millie,
Aye.
Anthony,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Amy? Oh, Amy, I can't hear you.